story this morning is a direct challenge to the Controlled Substances Act. It comes out of Massachusetts, and this case got filed back in December. I think 4 licensed cannabis companies in Massachusetts. It's a direct attack on Raich versus Gonzalez. And what we got on Monday was the government's response. And it's a whole lot more bovine scatology. So let's take a little bit of a look at this. This is coming out of the Department of Justice and Merrick Garland and the DEA. And their first response to the challenge of the Controlled Substances Act here is that you don't have any standing because you're not being prosecuted and the banks didn't do business with you. That's not a direct harm that you can relate to the federal government. And I would just remind people that there's a story this week out of New Mexico where Homeland Security and the Border Patrol has been grabbing distribution trucks and taking their weed. So that argument, I think, is bullshit because there is an active threat right now going on. Even though there's a spending preclusion, it still violates federal law. And the story from the government, oh, you're not being prosecuted at this moment, so therefore you have no standing, I think is nonsense. But this is going to move the case forward. The other argument is that there's no special category of people who consume or use cannabis or involved in the cannabis trade. This is the 14th Amendment's substantive due process argument that the Dobbs decision is based upon. And I just don't see the courts giving this a whole lot of credit because being able to smoke weed is not one of those important interests that the courts are going to recognize, especially under the court system we have right now. I think better chance here in the long run is just a direct challenge to the Raich versus Gonzalez case. And just for a little bit of historical perspective, the Constitution and the enumeration clause of Article 1 gives the Congress the power to regulate commerce amongst the several states. Okay, so interstate, intrastate within the state was never something the federal government thought it had the power to control. That is until FDR set up the Agriculture Administration Act, and he threatened to pack the court after the 1936 election. And one of the 5 conservative justices decided he's going to flip and become a progressive justice. And so we get this case called Wickard versus Filburn, where the Agricultural Adjustment Act controlled every grain of wheat that was grown in the whole country. Wheat was legal to grow, but only if you notified the government, they gave permission how much you could grow. And the farmer here decided, I'm going to grow 5 acres to feed my animals. And the Secretary of Agriculture said, no, you're not, because allowing you to do that takes away from the market where you would go to buy it. And because it has a substantial impact on interstate commerce, we're going to allow the courts to step in and tell you, intrastate, you can't do this because it violates the Commerce Clause. I mean, that's kind of geeky, but back in the early 2000s, Angel Raich and Diane Monson said, look, we're going to go challenge Wickard versus, they didn't even know about Wickard versus Filburn. They was going to challenge the Controlled Substances Act because we're going to grow it in the backyard, we're going to take it in our house, we're going to use it. It's never going to cross the state line. And the justices, dusted off Wickard versus Filburn from the early 1940s and said, it's the same thing. We're going to control intrastate activities under the Commerce Clause because we've got this grand scheme to prohibit marijuana. And I read Justice Thomas's dissent with some hope that maybe down the line we would take a look at the 10th Amendment, which is a specific amendment which gives the states all power not given to the federal government. The federal government was only allowed to do intrastate prohibition if it was a grand scheme that covered the entire country. And as we all know right now, half the country's got legal marijuana. So they're attacking the fundamental basis for the Raich case that, based upon what Clarence Thomas said, is that you're either all in or all out. You can't be half in or half out. Otherwise, the 10th Amendment is what controls here. So what I'm hoping is that these companies have the resources, because they're going to lose at the trial level. Gonzalez is the law. It's going to take the Supreme Court to overturn this. They're probably going to lose at the appellate level because, again, it's going to take the Supreme Court to overturn Raich. But my suspicion is if we get this in front of the Supreme Court, it's going to take a year or more to do that, the Supreme Court's going to go, hang on. We stopped Obamacare because you can't use the Commerce Clause to force people to buy insurance. I don't see the court agreeing that the Controlled Substances Act can control intra-state activities. Now, I don't know if that fixes the whole problem here, but I'm going to stand back and watch with some hope that the Supreme Court will throw the Controlled Substances Act out. Now, I hope this is the case to do it, but I'm going to throw it back at you guys and see what y'all think about this.
Dale, I love that we're getting your perspective on this one, because it's looking like, they have this powerhouse legal team behind them. It's looking like the one case that might actually crack the ceiling and bust all that they've been doing up. They are flailing, and the feds they keep on losing, and this one might make it all the way to the top. So if we can get the CSA thrown out, what's going to happen to the other drugs, though?
Okay, let's be realistic though. What are the chances that this Supreme Court will rule in favor of throwing this CSA?
Good.
I think so.
Better than good.
Yeah, no,
better than good.
Clarence Thomas has already signaled that if this comes into the Supreme Court, that he will side because he will toss down Raich versus Gonzalez. Because the state of legal cannabis is way different now from when it was when Raich versus Gonzalez was first decided, right? So we have a totally different system. The feds have a hands-off approach. What we had then was no weed anywhere, period. And the basis of what this, and Dale, I want to just say, brilliant. Thank you for the breakdown. That was perfect, a perfect point of view and historical context on the legality of this and how this whole issue has came about. So thank you for that. But the issue of this, of the way it rests on interstate commerce, is the theory that it can affect a black market in another state. Like, that is already a precarious basis to have this on, right? The theory that it could affect another black market in another state, right? You're not even supposed to recognize the black market if you are in legal terms, right? But we are. So I think the whole basis of how Raich versus Gonzalez was first decided. Shout out to Angel Raich too for all that you have done and all that you continue to do. I talked to her briefly a few weeks ago, and she's still an advocate. She's still down and a steward for this plant. But again, like the basis of how this case was decided is no longer there anymore. And I believe, Soham, if it does make it to the Supreme Court, that this is going to be a very interesting case that we may see come down our way.
Well, Chief Justice Roberts, when he announced the decision in the Obamacare, he drew a line on the Interstate Commerce Clause. I think we've got some people already on the side of that we have a 10th Amendment. It's specifically enumerated, and the feds don't get into the 10th Amendment area unless there's some compelling reason. And I think Raich basis for a compelling reason is totally gone, as you said, Luke. So I think we have a stage set here for the courts to take a step and go, nah, this is bullshit. You don't get to interfere in a state's business under a federal commerce clause argument under these circumstances. If they pull the plug on marijuana being in the CSA, who knows where it's going to end, because then it's free floating. Someone's going to have to get off their ass and do something to capture it in some legislative scheme, or it's going to go, you can't tax it. They want money from it. So, they're going to do whatever they can to keep the money. And right now, they're making more money with 280E, and the law enforcement folks are getting resourced. So, who wants to upset the apple cart? Well, people like me who went to fucking prison wanted to, and Luke too. We wanted upset. People who run businesses don't want the government up your ass for stuff that is in compliance with state law.
Agreed.
Period. So let's move this on to a place where it makes some sense.
Speaking of moving on,
right now it's fucking crazy.
Real quick, Dale. Do you think this is gonna be like a game of chicken, being played at the highest level, where our conservative court, Supreme Court right now, they're showing themselves to be like absolute constitutional absolutists, where the country has changed since the last amendments were made to the Constitution. Do you think we're going to actually get some amendments to the Constitution that are much needed, or do you think that this is just going to be, the conservatives on the court are going to throw this thing out and just give it away to the states?
Well, I would say the horse we have to ride right now is taken to the Supreme Court and make the argument that Clarence Thomas made in his dissent. Okay, if I'm advising these folks, it's like you pack your piggy bank for resources here, bring in every amicus you can from the ACLU to conservative libertarian groups, bring them in and force this to the court. I'll assert you're going to be there on certiorari asking them to take it up. I think that's where lobbying behind the scenes is going to take it up, because someone's got to break the logjam here. The politicians are such pussies. They won't do anything here. You're going to have to kick them in the ass and take it away from them. And that's what I think the court would do, because the court's not, it is political, but it's looking at this from the basis of read the Constitution. What the hell does it say? You don't have authority over the states. Okay, period. Get out of here.
And on that, we got to roll to a commercial. We're going to be right back.